That was your 2-minute countdown. And I've got Tom waiting in the wings tonight. This is a bit of a special show because this is Tom's last show on the Indie Show, at least at this juncture. And we're gonna talk about a bunch of cool stuff, music and other things. But let's hear from Tom first.
Thanks, Kenny. This week on the show, we're going to talk about this guy. He wrote one of the greatest protest songs ever. His band had dozens of hits, and by 1969, they even were outselling the Beatles. But he didn't own his own catalog because he got screwed by this guy. The screwing continued for 50 years, and it only ended a few days ago. We'll tell you the story of John Fogerty and other artists who fought with their record companies this week on the Indie Show. Thanks,
Right,
Kenny.
so
this week
there we go. There's one there, and I'm going to add another one here because I think we need to hear a couple more times from Tom tonight. Let's take a look at this one right here.
And now for something really crazy and different. Take it away, Tom!
Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Jokic from the Famous Last Words podcast. This week and every week on the Indie Show, we talk about music. It's not flashy. There's no frills. It's just straight ahead, just like this. Okay, this is a demonstration. Well, despite how terrible that was, I promise this week's show will be really great. Join us this week on the Indie Show.
Oh, there's that Tom guy again. I think we got one more. I'm gonna flash up here for you because I think this is one of the best ones that I think is my favorite anyway. And we'll play this one here, and then we're gonna have Tom be himself with me here on the show. And here it is. And I don't look too surprised in this one at all.
You know, our content shows with my co-host Tom Jokic from the podcast Famous Lost Words are never boring. Always a great hour of conversation about music and independent music and everything going on in the music industry. I wonder what Tom's got up his sleeve for this week. Let's check in and see.
What? I'm doing my research.
And here he is. Hey, Tom. You got your Kiss shirt on there.
How are you, Kenny?
I'm doing great, buddy.
Good.
How was your evening so far?
Good. I mean, I'm always a little bit, I'm always not anxious, but when you and I are going to be, doing the show together, I start kind of getting into the thought of it like a few hours earlier. So
Right.
for the last 3 hours, I've been in Kenny mode, right? And since tonight is our big breakup, like tonight's the grand finale, the final round.
That's right.
I've been getting ready.
All right. Well, listen, I'm gonna put us both on the screen here, and
Sure.
And then we'll go head to head. How's that sound?
Yeah, fantastic.
All right. So we're gonna talk a little bit about Tina Turner tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as we heard last week, Tina Turner passed away at the age of 83. And, her story is remarkable, right? Like she started, her first hit was A Fool in Love in 1960 with Ike Turner. And what happened is, I think it was about 1957, 58, Ike Turner was very famous. And he was playing, I think it's St. Louis, Missouri, around the area where Tina was from. And she would go see him all the time because she was a big fan. And Ike was an extremely problematic person, especially later on in Tina's life. Very violent and awful to her. And, that people know a lot about that history. But he was also an important figure in rock and roll. Arguably, he wrote and performed the first rock and roll song called Rocket 88, although it was credited to the lead singer, a guy named Jackie Brenston. But Ike was a legend, even by the time by the late 50s when Tina saw him. And so he's up on stage, and I think it's between sets or something like that. And Tina's going, from the audience, Ike, let me sing. and he's not interested, and somehow a live mic is on the floor of the stage, and she grabs it and starts singing, and he goes, "Oh my god, do you know any other songs?" And then he brings her up on stage, and she becomes part of the group. And at first she's a kind of a backup person, and then he sees what she is, and that is a dynamic performer. And so
Right.
he brings her on stage, and changes her name. Her real name is Anime Bullock, and he changes her name to Tina Turner. And eventually they get married, and she says in her book, I, Tina, that she had no intention, that she didn't want to be married. She didn't want to be married to this man who was fooling around with every woman he could fool
Right.
around with.
Right.
And but this was her career now, and it was very valuable to her, and so she stayed. And then of course we know a lot of the things that happened over the years between Ike and Tina, and but they were still a very, very valuable commodity as an act. And the more they played, the more people went, "Oh my god! Look at this woman perform. She's so good. She's such a great singer. She's such a raw performer, and then she has this stage presence which is magnetic, and and also, so many people want to work with her." So another problematic person comes into her life, and that is Phil Spector.
Right.
And Spector wants to record a song called "River Deep Mountain High" with Ike and Tina Turner. But he wants Ike and Tina Turner on their name on the label, but he doesn't want Ike. So he pays Ike Turner. This is one of my favorite stories in music history. He pays Ike Turner $20,000 to stay away from the studio so that Spector can work with Tina alone. And the song is a bomb. It's one of Spector's first big bombs. It goes to 99 on the charts in the US.
Right.
In the UK, it's a big hit. So Ike and Tina tour the UK because the Rolling Stones have asked for them to tour with the Stones. So now they tour with the Stones in UK, and then later in North America, and they become really it opens up a whole new audience for them. So now people are seeing Tina Turner, and it's great and all that stuff. But by the mid 70s, she needed to get out. And so she has 36 cents to her name. She escapes in the middle of the night, basically, runs across a highway, ends up at a hotel, and says to the hotel guy, "I'm Tina Turner. I have no money. Would you please put me up in a suite? And I will pay you back when I can." And that began her long journey into creating her own solo career.
Right.
And another one of my very favorite stories is, even though it's kind of horrifying, that when she negotiated to end her relationship with Ike, he got everything. He fought. He would not let her have everything, and she had to fight for the one thing that she wanted. And she only wanted one thing from Ike. She wanted her name. She wanted to continue to call herself Tina Turner.
Right.
Can you imagine that, having to fight for your own name?
Well, it's kind of crazy because I
Yeah.
mean he probably trademarked the name.
Yes. Yeah.
And if he owned the trademark to the name, then it's her stage name, but it's not her rightful name. So
Right.
it's like one of these things like, okay, now I've got to fight this guy to get
Yes.
my name.
Yes, that was her currency, and she knew that's all she had, and that's all she really wanted.
So she
And so
gave him everything to get her name though, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so she had to work for years to pay off debts. Ended up, of course, in the early '80s with the comeback, with the big comeback song, with "What's Love Got to Do with It." Records an album with Mark Knopfler called "Private Dancer." It becomes a
Right.
massive hit. Later on in the '80s, she records "Foreign Affair" with the best, simply the best. And her career and her comeback is fully cemented by that point, and she was considered just one of the most electrifying performers in music history. And you can see all kinds of videos and tributes on YouTube. Brian Adams had a big tribute to her. Mick Jagger said he learned so much from her, and he was so grateful, even though Tina was grateful to Mick. And of course, they had a very interesting live set at Live Aid, And so there's so much to her history. You could go on for 4 or 5 hours talking about Tina Turner, but those are my thoughts. And just one more thing, um, we did a special tribute on Famous Lost Words to Tina because we had interview clips from the early days, from the 70s when she was still with Ike, talking about how she first got on stage with him. And then Christopher Ward, my co-host, interviewed Tina in 1989, and we have highlights from that interview on Much Music on our podcast, on our podcast called Famous Lost Words. And then
So
Marilyn
cool.
Dennis and I did an interview with Tina in the year 2000. And I met Tina then, and she was great, really phenomenal interview. And that's part of our latest tribute episode for Famous Lost Words and Tina Turner.
Oh, so you better go over there and check that podcast out, folks. Famous Lost Words with
Yeah.
Tom Jokic and Christopher. Yeah, so check that out because it's a great show. They got lots of great historical interview clips, and then they give their impressions on those clips, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what
Mm,
we do. We did it with
right,
with when after Gordon Lightfoot passed, and it's not always people passing and then we do an episode.
right,
We do probably about 20 episodes a year, and it's just great stuff from our archives. Ozzy Osbourne right after he left Black Sabbath,
right,
the lead singer of Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden. But we also have Beyonce, and we also have Taylor Swift, and we have John Lennon, and we have Boy George, and we have everybody from all eras talking to us. And some of them are talking to me, like whether it's Alanis Morissette or Don Henley or even Mick Jagger. I talked to Mick Jagger
right.
in 2001. So
And we're going to be talking about the relationships and their breakups later in the show.
that's right, buddy. That's right. Because you and I are done.
Yes, yeah, no, we're done. And you know what? We're here. I'm going to tell you why we're done. I've already got your replacement. I'm sorry, but I already
Oh,
got your replacement. And he said he's made a comment down below. It says, "Hi Ken, love the trivia and stories told." Junior Leclerc.
yeah,
So Junior is formerly of Q107,
right.
and
Oh,
and, and
very
Junior's
cool.
going and so Junior's going to be Junior was there, I think, at least a quarter century.
Yeah,
So I think he's going to bring some of some of that Tom vibe to the show too.
that's great. Now, does Junior know about this, or is he just finding this out right now while
Uh,
you're talking to us?
no, Junior knew that we were going to be bringing him on the show,
Yeah.
and when you told me that you needed a break from the show, I contacted Sean McKenna and said, "Hey, Sean, you got any buddies or somebody out there that would be really interested?" Well, here it turns out Junior lives in Barrie.
Oh, great.
So, he's kind of like in my back door, and I go biking up that way, so I may end up dropping up and seeing him.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's going to join the show, and he's going to bring another perspective to the show, which is great because I've certainly enjoyed your tenure with the show, Tom. You brought such a richness to it from your knowledge of the music industry and your knowledge of all the mainstream stuff. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well,
it's
thank
been
you. That's really kind. I really appreciate that. Kenny, it's always been a lot of fun talking to you, and I love talking about music, and I love I read about music, I listen to music, I listen to podcasts about music, I I read current up to date stuff about music and music news. You got me into current music news because of this show, and
right.
so it's a gift from you as well.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, the thing is that we both have a love of music and a love of the industry itself in terms of the entertainment value it holds for people and the fact that the great thing about music, as my friend Bob says, there's something for everyone.
Hmm. Yes,
Uh,
we
there,
agree.
there truly is. So, I mean, we're going to talk about these breakups tonight. These really, really
Yeah.
bad breakups that happen, and I mean, I got a little segue that I want to share with you. Something that I read, and maybe it resonates with people. When you think about being in a band or a group, it's sometimes maybe easier being a solo artist because being in a band can be really tricky.
Mhm.
Especially if you start out in a band as a bunch of young people. And historically, bands were dominated by guys.
Yeah.
Right. There weren't many bands in the early days that were, not dominated by males. And of course, you got that much testosterone in the room. There's going to be bound to be some disagreements,
Yes. For
right?
sure.
And especially, not just the fact that when you're all young, because at that point in time, sometimes people don't look that they got a lot to lose if the band breaks up before they get really famous.
Right. And also they're just developing as like their own characteristics are developing too, right? They're their own discovering their own humanity, their own personalities, and all that. And then sometimes, like what you said, all that testosterone, if they get successful, sometimes they're frozen in this adolescence or just post-adolescent situation because they haven't had to grow up because now all of a sudden they're wealthy
Yep.
and men or women are big fans of theirs, and what happens with that. And
Yep.
then and then they imbibe in alcohol and drugs and all kinds of things. And so all that stuff can be very fun, but it also can be extremely damaging to your growth as a human being, right?
And there's a certain amount of emotional intelligence that people develop as they age, and sometimes that growth gets stunted for whatever reason.
Hmm.
And we're sometimes stuck in that place of not realizing that we've got to, everything needs to remain negotiable and fluid. It's kind of like being in a marriage.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's give and take, and sometimes you might not like something the other person does, but your love for what you're doing should allow you to overlook it.
I agree, and yeah, it transcends it, and you overlook it, and you sometimes you gloss over it because you realize
Right.
this is not the hill that I want to fight on right now. And then sometimes you just you realize that your love for that person is bigger than whatever that problem is. You know?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that when we talk about these breakups, um, at the root of a lot of these breakups, there was some, for lack of a better term, arrested development in terms of some emotional intelligence that
Right?
either developed in some members of the band and maybe not others,
Yeah.
or everybody got to this point where they went, you know what, I don't really want to do this anymore, not with you guys,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah,
You know,
or if one person gets big, like let's say the police, right?
right,
So the police are they start off as three very accomplished performers, musicians mostly, and
right.
then they start gelling, and then Stuart Copeland's band at first, but then they realize they've got a primo songwriter in Sting. And so Sting keeps coming out with these songs, and the band starts selling. You're on camera, right, buddy? Uh,
Mm. Oh yeah, baby.
anyway, so Sting starts writing these amazing songs, and the other guys go, "Oh, this is great! We've got hits." And so they become bigger and bigger, and then they realize that Sting's going to be making a lot more money because he's writing the songs, and they want to write songs, and they write songs, and Sting is going, "Guys, these songs are garbage, right?" And that doesn't go over well. Like if
Hard
you
to
listen
tell
to
your
the
bandmates their songs suck, eh?
Right. But you listen to the album Synchronicity. Synchronicity is a great album. It's their fifth album, it's their last album. And then you hear the song by Stuart Copeland called Miss Gradenko. And then you go, and then you hear, is it oh my God? Or Mother Dear, or something, Oh Mother, or something like that, by Andy Summers. And it's horrible, horrible.
Right.
And so you see Sting's point, but you also see their point that they want some songwriting credits too, and they need a little bit of love in that way as well.
We
And the
also saw we also saw a very similar thing happen with CCR when John Fogerty said, "Okay, you guys want to write an album?
yeah,
Okay, well then
yes,
let's write an album together."
Yeah.
right? You weren't happy that I'm writing hit after hit after hit after hit,
Yes.
and our music's getting in soundtracks and everything else. You're not happy with that.
Yeah.
So let's go write an album that you want to write. And
Yeah.
what happened to that album?
Disaster. What was it
It
called? Like Mardi Gras or something like that?
yeah, but
Disaster.
it tanked. I mean, it completely tanked. And
Yeah.
here's this band, from 68 to 70. I mean, 2 years, they pounded out 6 albums in 2 years.
Right. But it's almost all, it's almost all Fogerty songs, and in some cases, he would re-record his band members' parts because he didn't like the way they were playing.
Yeah,
Obviously, it would make them very upset.
yeah,
But there's so many bands, there's so many bands from the '60s. You hear them on vinyl, and the songs are great, great musicianship, and then you realize it's the Wrecking Crew, these hired
that's right.
session
That's
musicians
right.
that are playing their songs, including the Beach Boys. Like for years, the Beach Boys were Brian Wilson and then session musicians like Glenn Campbell,
Yeah.
Hal Blaine, and all these other guys. So imagine how they feel, right? And
Yeah, I
and
mean, and the thing is that, like, how do you do that when one guy's writing songs that are doing well in the band,
yeah,
and I mean, maybe you're at that place, maybe y'all have to arrive at that place and go, it doesn't matter how much our album is good, it doesn't matter how much our album sucks. What matters now is that we're all in this together. We're all working together, and we all feel more like equal partners in this partnership.
and that's why it was a great idea that when Gord Downie split the songwriting credits 4 ways, the songwriting
Right,
royalties and all that,
right.
or 5 ways, however many were in the Tragically Hip. So
Yeah,
when he did that, they all made the same amount of money. Now, I mean, there's part of me that would argue, like, Gord did the heavy lifting, right? He
right.
comes up with most of the melodies, he comes up with all the lyrics, but in the spirit of band unity, guys, you're all part of this. You're all important. We're going to split it evenly. That's amazing. That takes a very big person to do that.
Well,
I
and
don't know if I could do that.
you think about that, though. I mean, even if the melody's there, it takes that cooperation of everyone putting their creative juices together.
Mhm.
And I get a sense that Gord wasn't like super prescriptive about what they would add, in their parts to the songs, right? So, I mean, you think about that, and there's a recipe for a band that wants to stay together and work together because everybody's got a chance to contribute. Even though one guy might be the main writer, he might come up with the licks, he might come up with some of the licks, and the lyrics. But if everybody's contributing,
Mhm.
right, you got to think about that because the end product, what you're after at the end of the day, would it have been that way if everybody hadn't have contributed their part?
Exactly. Well, exactly. Now think about the story of um, of the band, right?
Okay, yeah,
Robbie
good
Robertson
good
writes
example.
all these damn songs, and Levon Helm sings "The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down." Levon Helms is the only guy from the American South on in the band. Robbie Robertson writes it from, from the point of view, I think, of a Civil War veteran, I think, fighting for the South. And so he does this, and you got to know that Levon's input, even though he didn't write the song, is valuable to the sound of that song. But he doesn't get songwriting credit. And later on, many years later, uh, that's when shit gets real between Levon and Robbie. And they never really did patch up the differences.
No, and
Um,
I think a lot of them, maybe couldn't patch up those differences because there were such creative differences for a period of time,
yeah,
and it's allowed, without anybody actually talking about the elephant in the room, right?
yeah,
It, that it's like a bad sore that begins to fester, and before
yeah,
you know it, it's beyond repair, right?
right. Can you put up the one comment there
Yeah,
from
by Mary. Yeah, it's
Mary?
great.
Yeah,
It's a great comment. Mary
yeah,
says, "Hey, Mary, thanks for joining the show tonight. Hi, everyone needs to be mature to achieve this, though, right?
yeah.
And
So
join the
right, and so she's making the point that all of these guys and some women, they have to be mature to get through this process in a mature way, and And, when you have people who are, let's say, relationships, right? Let's say Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham. They're a duo, they're a couple, they're like a musical partnership, and then they get brought into Fleetwood Mac. Mick Fleetwood says, "I want you, Lindsey." Lindsey says, "You can only have me if I can bring Stevie." He brings Stevie in, one of the best moves ever. They become really big, but they also break up famously in the making of the album Rumors. And so now they have to be mature. Meanwhile, Christine McVie has broken up with her husband, John McVie, and she's
That's just
writing
messy.
songs. She's writing songs, I think, about their sound. She's in love with the sound guy for Fleetwood Mac, writing songs for him, like "You Make Love and Fun." John McVie is going like, "Who's this song about?" And
Ain't about me.
to be mature, like Mary says, and it's hell. But they still managed to make what is arguably the best non Joni Mitchell album of the '70s.
I mean, it was a great album.
Yeah,
It was well done and well written. I mean, no doubt about that. I mean, kudos to them for working through that tumultuous time because that was a difficult time, no
right.
doubt.
Yeah,
Um, especially if there's relationships form in the band and then, they break up and then it's like, okay, we're breaking up. Are you leaving the band too?
sure,
Right.
sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and I know of situations where that's actually happened to artists where, they're working in a band and then they develop a personal relationship with their manager,
Oof, right.
right? And that can be difficult,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
For
It
sure.
can be difficult to manage it because at some point in time, you know, um, one of them could be asked to leave, saying, "Look, you can't be both. You can't be both a manager and a partner with one of the people in the band, right?" Or they're saying the same thing, right?
Yeah.
It's not right. Your partner is managing us now
Yeah.
because maybe we don't want that to happen.
Hmm. I
Um,
think that's happened. Also, what happens is, I think in the case of Journey, I don't know if it's Neil Sean or Jonathan Kane. One of their wives have become kind of a bit of a manager in the band, and
right.
so that can be a real issue when a partner, male or female, is becoming a partner of one of the members of the group is now having an outsized effect on kind of the power dynamic, right?
Yeah, in the corporate world, they refer to that as conflict of interest.
Right, for sure. Hey, can you put
And
up Bruce's comment there?
yeah, that's another great comment as well. Thanks for the comment, Bruce.
Yeah.
Bruce Onbright says it's all about ego when when their heads are too big for the band.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about Van Halen. Let's talk about Van Halen Mach 1, as I call it, David Lee Roth.
Yeah, like three
David Lee
different
Roth,
breakups for that band.
right, right. So David Lee Roth decides in 1984 that he wants the sound of Van Halen to become more synthy. And they had great success with Jump, and there's a lot more synths in that 1984 album. But he also wants to do Dave is a clown, and he wants to be appreciated as a clown, and I don't mean that with any disrespect. Well, actually, I do a little bit, um, but Dave wants to make movies. He wants to do a few solo things, and he
Right.
does his cover version of "Just a Gigolo," and he does his cover version of "California Girls," and he wants to be that clownish MTV figure, and by then the rest of the guys in Van Halen have had enough of this clown, right? And it's too bad because to me there's no argument, or there's no arguing the fact that Van Halen Part 1 was the best Van Halen.
Well, Dave was a show, right?
Yes,
Dave brought his showmanship to the
that's right.
show, and so he brought his game face on, and he put on a show for, and he had this like great trio playing music behind him while he
That's
got to
right.
put on his show. I mean,
Yeah,
you know, it. I think the problem in that situation is, when you got three guys behind you and they're watching him being the showman, of the band, and everybody's focused on the guy running around on the stage acting like crazy and doing jumps and splits and all this other shit that he's doing, right? And so the focus is on the guy putting on the show and not necessarily always the music in the background.
Right, and the fine musicians, especially Eddie, right?
Yeah, yeah. I
That
mean, and the thing is, though, they did find ways to really showcase, all their talents in that band when they started working on formulations for their shows.
mhm.
And it's too bad they just didn't keep working on that. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened if they had kept working on that and sort of choreographing their shows to
Yeah,
see, because I think their shows just would have got better and better and better. And then there would have been a point where Dave would have to lead the band because he just couldn't do that anymore. Right.
sure. Now, but one of the other things about Dave is after every concert, the next day they would have a postmortem. And it's healthy for bands to talk about shows and that. But Dave would lead the postmortem. The meetings would last for 90 minutes and he would criticize everyone else but himself. And
Oh,
so and so
that's
when
so
you're on a
good.
tour, you're just kind of going, "Oh my God, Dave, you got to stop." Now Dave, in my opinion, David Lee Roth has some things going on in his head, and he has the need to talk nonstop, kind of like what I'm doing right now. And so and so that was really hard on the rest of the guys in the band for sure, for
I,
sure.
I think I think Dave might be a bit bipolar.
I think so. Yeah. Well, there's something
He
unique about him.
he
It
does have
seems
sort of
like
a man. He does have a sort of a manic sort of feel about him. He's
Mhm.
always on the move. He may even have like a form of ADHD, maybe not even bipolar, but maybe kind of ADHD because he's
Sure.
always got to move and he's always on the go and he's like
Right. Well, he's a little bit
yeah.
like Steven Tyler in that way. Have you read Steven Tyler's book? Geez, dude, can you put a sentence together? Like it's entertaining, right? But there are times when you get a headache trying to follow what he's trying to say. But
Yeah,
anyway,
I mean,
let me talk about Van Halen Part Two. So Sammy
sure,
joins, and then they split up. But anyway, they reunite in 2004 with Sammy. And Eddie Van Halen was in bad shape, and he fought a lot with Sammy. And I think Eddie was imbibing. I think it was alcohol at the time,
right.
but he was real. Now get this. This is so childish and it's so unimportant, right? He was so incensed that Sammy Hagar wore a tattoo with the brand of his tequila called Cabo Wabo, right?
Yeah, he
And he
was
goes,
like promoting his tequila on the
right.
tour.
And he goes, "You can't do that." And Eddie shows him his tattoo with what says Van Halen. He says, "This tattoo will live on far longer than your stupid tequila was." And they never toured again, but they did patch up their differences by the time that Eddie passed away.
So there was a part in there between that first incarnation, that breakup of the first band, and then before Sammy Hagar. Did you know of Van Halen's Lost Boy?
No.
So I'll get you. Here's a little fun thing for you to do. His name is Mitch Malloy,
Okay.
and Mitch Malloy was supposed to be the lead singer for the band after David Lee Roth.
Oh,
He
okay.
was he was the band's pick to replace David Lee Roth, but the whole thing kind of fell apart
I
at
see.
some point because Dave ended up appearing with the band at some awards show and not their new singer.
Oh,
So
so what did Dave? So did they find Mr. Malloy's body in the back of Dave's car or something, or what?
it's an interesting story. I mean, you can watch it. It's called Mitch Malloy, Van Halen's Lost Boy. Watch it on YouTube. It's a
Oh, cool.
documentary.
Yeah.
It's really an interesting story. Mitch is a very successful musician, solo artist, got a killer voice, and he actually fronts a Van Halen tribute that, I mean, if you closed your eyes, you wouldn't know the difference.
Wow, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Can you put up Bruce's second comment there about Genesis?
Oh yeah, but Peter Gabriel,
Yeah.
sure.
So one of the things that happened. Thanks for lobbing in these softballs there, Bruce. I'm just going to swing at this one, okay? So what happens is I think it's 1975. Peter Gabriel leaves the band, and he leaves Genesis because I think he's just his wife Jill has just had a baby, and I think the baby is sick. And Peter Gabriel wants to be at home with his wife and child while that baby's getting better. I'm doing all this off the top of my head.
Right.
And the band is going, they're not at all sympathetic to Peter's plight.
Right. Not
And
supportive at
so
all.
right. And so what happens is he goes, well, screw this. I'm out of here. They didn't, and they, obviously they couldn't come to an agreement. So Peter, what does Peter do? He writes a song about it called Salisbury Hill. And if you listen to the lyrics of Salisbury Hill, it directly addresses his bandmates. Now, the good news is that it never really tore their relationship apart too badly because um, Peter Gabriel played. Phil Collins played on Peter Gabriel's solo albums, and Peter Gabriel also contributed to some of Phil Collins' solo work too. But it was just one of those things. It was a bad breakup that, in the long run, wasn't all that bad for either party because they both had great success, and they seem to have patched things up over the years.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about breakups of different bands that influenced others over the years. I mean, look at the breakup of the Beach Boys and Brian Wilson.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to follow up on that one? I don't have that one with me, even though I think you and I were working from the same source material.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they there was a lot of resentments and legal battles between them.
Yeah.
Um, you know, um,
Excuse me.
and I think that there was just a bunch of other battles. I don't know if those were over rights royalties or writing royalties. I'm not
Yeah.
exactly sure.
I think that Mike Love ended up suing for some, like for 25% of the songwriting royalties because he did
Right.
write the lyrics. I interviewed him in 1995 and asked him about the creation of the song Good Vibrations. And he said to me, like, Good Vibrations is because my cousin Brian Wilson is a genius, and he creates this musical masterpiece, and he's in the studio doing all this, and I'm on my way to the studio to record the vocals, but I have to write the lyrics. And he said, I wrote the lyrics in like 15 minutes. He's going down, he's driving through the streets, probably in a convertible of LA, and he thinks, he's going, I love the colorful clothes she wears, right? And then he goes,
Yep.
that's it. That will go in the song. And then he writes the rest of the song about good vibrations. So it's a real great collaboration of someone who's being very spontaneous in the moment, Mike Love, who I'm personally not a fan of. I
Right.
don't appreciate his politics and some of the terrible things that I think that he's said, and this genius Brian Wilson. And of course, sometime very recently, Brian and Mike Love have been at odds over over Mike Love calling himself the Beach Boys and playing at political events that Brian Wilson doesn't agree with.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of almost like the CCR band still touring a CCR.
Yeah, yeah. Clear,
You know,
Creedence Clearwater revisited.
yeah, it's a whole you know can of worms. I think. I mean, I had to be honest with you though. I mean, back when people were listening to the Beach Boys, I was listening to heavier stuff.
Oh yeah, me too. And my brother had the End of Summer album with all those great hits, and I loved the songs. I
Yeah,
really did. And he would go to the concerts at the CNE with the Beach Boys, and I think BTO was on the bill, and they would come every year to the CNE, and he would come back and just rave about it. So that's awesome.
yeah.
They certainly have a piece in music history. I actually now appreciate their genius way more than I did then. I thought their music was really lightweight then.
Yeah, like I said, I just wanted to throw it out there. Just saying that again, the same thing. You get a bunch of guys working together, and eventually there's a disagreement that sort of leads to the breakdown of the relationship,
Right,
right? And
right.
then there's a lot of other things that happen. I mean, sometimes it ends up over the songwriting issues.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's about somebody, taking on too much responsibility. There's always a guy in the band, or usually in a band, that's one of the heavier lifters.
Oh
In
yeah, for sure.
in a band, right? That might be the guy, especially when they're, before they're famous. He might be the guy that makes sure that everything's where it's supposed to be, that there's a sound
Yeah.
system, that there's lights, that there's all the other things that need to go. There's always maybe a go-to guy. And
Hmm.
sometimes people don't realize that that go-to guy didn't want to be the go-to guy.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of I'm trying to think of what bands this reminds me of, but there's a lot of cases where one guy, it comes down to one guy to write 10 songs, 10 great songs every year for their next album,
Yeah,
and they feel that it's too much of a burden. Oh, I know who it was. So Tom Johnson gets sick while he's in the Doobie Brothers, and one of the reasons is because he can't carry the load by himself. Right, he's writing all the great songs,
yeah.
so he leaves to get better. Michael McDonald fills in, replaces him. For better or worse, depending on how you feel about that situation. But Michael McDonald says, I can't write 10 great songs without some help. So Patrick Simmons steps up, and other guys, they bring in outside people. Michael McDonald writes What a Fool Believes with Kenny Loggins, right? So he gets some help. And of course, the band flourishes. It's a completely different band sound wise. But yeah, that's a heavy load to keep. And, we have him on tape saying, I can't do it by myself. And I'm glad I have other guys in the band who can write songs.
And thank goodness he didn't believe that he could. He thought, you know what, I need some help. I
Yeah.
need some creative help to do things. And I know of a couple of bands where that actually happened, and it didn't necessarily cause the breakup of the band, but the loss of a band member who was a writing partner in
Oof.
the band
Yeah.
can really deal a blow, especially if their exit from the band is not due to anyone's fault but their passing,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I mean, think of bands where there's been writing partners where one of those writing partners died,
Hmm.
and it just changed things,
Yeah.
especially because maybe that writing partner was actually writing the next album,
Yeah. Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. So can we? You know what? We're already like, dude. We're already running out of time.
I
Like,
know
we
we're
got
like
so
we're
much.
we're like 16 minutes off the top of the hour, so go go
So
go go go.
okay, so let me just run through a few of them. First of all, this one is funny to me. So I don't know if you remember the Pussycat Dolls, early 2000s. I think they had a song called "Don't You Wish Your Girlfriend Was Hot Like Me." That song,
That's
actually,
right.
I thought that was a great song, really kind of funny and great and all that stuff. But they have a lead singer by the name of Nicole Scherzinger, right? And
Yeah,
she is kind of the focal point of the group, even though the band started, I think, as like a burlesque act out of Vegas,
yeah.
and so they have these people. So it gets really ugly when the record company, I think it's Jimmy Iovine, owner of the manager of the record company, says we need to change it to the Pussycat Dolls featuring Nicole Scherzinger. So they put her
Huh.
name on it, and that, of course, is really bothersome to the other people. But I think Jimmy Iovine wants to eventually launch Nicole Scherzinger as a solo artist. Okay. So that's that. They break up. It's not great. But I need to tell you about the time that they came into the Chum FM morning show to perform. Okay.
Okay.
So there's five women in the band. So they go, okay, guys, we need five. This is from the band management. They're going to sing on the show, and we need five microphones set up, but you only need to plug three of them in.
Oh no.
We're like, what? Like, I don't
What?
even think we were videoing, but but give us five microphones, each on their own stand. You only have to. Only three of them are live. It
Okay.
was a good performance. It was fine and all that, but I just got such a laugh out of the fact that they did that.
So
That's
why
what.
why would there only be 3 live mics? Is it
Well,
because 2
my
were the
feeling
best singers
is
or what?
my feeling is that there was of the five people that were in the studio that day,
Right.
only three of them were really singers. The others were performers and dancers,
Ah, okay.
right? But I guess to make the others, feel part of the family, give them microphones, right? And but don't just don't run them live. You know what we should have done?
So,
Faded down the main three and put up the other two to
so
see what
that
happens
beg so
there.
that begs a question, that begs a question. whether or not when they did their live shows, were there only three of them singing, and that they just fatten up the vocals?
It could be. It could be. And I mean, Nicole
Yeah,
Scherzinger, like the sound quality on the performance was
right.
really good, right? So, it didn't bother me that much. It's Pussycat Dolls. They do what they do, and they did it well.
Reminds
It's
me
just
reminds me kind of like flash in the pan though, kind of almost like these TikTok sensations that are getting signed to major record labels.
yeah.
You know, it's all, it's all show but no go because there's nothing behind that.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, I got a really cute song and it's going to go viral, but I got no catalog.
Well, that's true. But you and I, it's funny. One of the very first stories that we were going to do, and I don't think we ever got around to it, was about a TikTok performer, and I can't remember her name, but she's actually done quite well based
Right.
on a 45-minute song clip. She got a record deal and all that stuff, and she's done okay. And
And
so,
and
good for
so
her. She
and I
knows how to
call
do
that
it.
the exception to the rule
Yes,
because probably used TikTok as a way to launch her career, but she probably was already writing for a long
I would
time.
think so. I would think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some people do that, but I mean, I've heard of ones where that's not the case. It's their first attempt at writing a song and it happens to just be a hit,
Right.
right?
Right.
But then they have no idea how they came up with that, and then they either can't reproduce it or they have a significant case of writer's block,
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
And next,
Let me keep going. So,
sure,
group UB40, Red Red Wine, and a few other songs, including a cover of "I Got You, Babe,"
right,
with Chrissy Hind. Anyway, 2008, the lead singer of the group, Ali Campbell, decides to leave and go solo. To replace him, they hire his brother Duncan, who apparently isn't that great of a performer. Okay,
yep.
so Ali accuses his brother of murdering his songs. And what Ali does is he goes, "Oh shoot." He goes, "So he forms a rival UB40. He forms another band and also calls it UB40. So now there's two UB40s. One with the brother of the lead singer and the rest of the band, and the other with the main lead singer and a hired group of guys, right? And the brothers to this day are still not on speaking terms. Okay, there's one.
That
Um,
now wasn't that similar with the Everly Brothers too?
I don't think they hired another brother. I think they got into a big fight on stage. I think it was about
Right.
1970, 71, and
Yeah.
they didn't work together for many, many years
It was
afterwards.
just one fight that just continued though. It wasn't a
Yes,
series
they
of
said it
fights,
was a
right?
fight that continued for like 25 years, I
Yeah,
think is what
yeah,
they said. Yeah.
it's like this major family feud between the two of them.
Well, yeah, and speaking of family
Crazy.
feuds, right? Oasis, Liam and Noel Gallagher, they have the bitterest relationship of any two brothers in music, and that includes the Kinks with Dave Davies and Ray Davies. But
Right.
and I the funny thing is even though I want these guys to reunite, when they bitch at each other, it is the funniest thing. It's so funny when they insult each other. My favorite quote, this is absurd, but it makes me laugh. So Noel Gallagher once said, "Liam is the angriest man you'll ever meet. He's like a man with a fork in a world of soup."
Like
That's so
man
bizarre.
with a fork and a but that I mean that's not mean.
No, but well, trust me, they get mean,
I mean,
right?
it describes his approach to life. I mean, everybody, when you eat soup, you better have a decent spoon.
Right, right. But so the last concert, I think was in 2009, and Liam was really angry and he swung a guitar at Noel's head. I don't know what Liam was doing with a guitar. He shouldn't be near a guitar. But anyway,
Mary Baxter says they're just Irish.
now hang
LOL.
on. Are they Irish?
Yeah, they're Irish. That's
Are
what
they?
she
Okay,
says.
because I thought they were from Manchester. Maybe I don't know my geography very well. That's funny. But
They're just
Noel smashed
Irish.
the guitar and walked off, and the show was canceled. And this is 2009. They've never played again, including at that Manchester Strong show where that terrorist attack was.
Right.
And who was it? Oh my goodness, I can't remember the singer. Anyway, I think Selena Gomez, and they have this big concert, and everybody's hoping that the Gallagher brothers will, in fact, reunite for that, and they never did. They never have, and I really hope they do because, man, imagine how much money those guys could
Right.
get just by coming out and singing, Rock and Roll Star and
Right.
Don't Look Back in Anger and Wonderwall and all those songs.
Did you tell me you did Journey?
I did not do Journey, no, because we've talked about them lately. I was picking and choosing, buddy, and I didn't do Journey.
Well, it's fun. Again, it's funny because the band really came to its end when Steve Perry decided to leave the band.
Right. And
Right.
what happened is he hurt his hip. He hurt his hip, and
Yep.
he took a very, very long time to determine when he was going to get the hip replacement surgery that he
Yep.
needed. And he didn't like being given a time frame or an ultimatum.
Yep.
And the band was patient for a while, and then they ran out of patience. So I can actually see it both ways. Now, I've chatted. I've chatted. I've chatted with Steve Perry about this, and I really like the guy. I kind of believe him more than I believe some of the other guys in Journey. And what he basically said is they gave me an ultimatum, and I don't think those are band members being nice to their fellow bandmate. And he goes, I didn't want any part of it, and they never performed. Like they did reunite a few times after that, but once he left permanently, it was done.
Right. So name me a really great song that they've written since Steve Perry left the band.
No idea. Can't do
There
one.
you go. There
Can't do
you
one.
go. I mean,
No.
and he brought such energy to the stage. I mean, talk about a showman. He was another guy that was a great showman as well.
Mhm,
I
mhm,
remember
and
him running
just
around in the top hat and tails, scooting across the stage, running all over the place like a crazy man while he was singing, and he could sing incredibly.
he could, yeah, he could. Can
Yeah.
you put
Next,
that Bruce message there, about the Eagles?
about the Eagles.
Yeah, because I have this one. So, as people know, they're a very fractious band, right? Over the years, a lot of things that happened over the years, but it really all came to a head. And I think it was in 1979. They are doing a fundraiser for a politician. And before they go on stage, the politician goes down the line and thanks all the members of the band because Henley and Fry really wanted to do this for this guy to raise some money for him.
Right.
And this guy's going down. He goes, "Thank you so much, Mr. Henley. Thank you, Mr. Fry." And then he says to Don Felder, "Thank you very much, Mr. Thanks Don for being here." And he goes, "Yeah, whatever, I guess." And the other members of the band, especially Fry, are so pissed off that while they're performing this fundraiser, in between songs, you can see they're doing a countdown to when they're going to get to beat up Don Felder, right? Okay, buddy, two more songs, three more songs. You better get ready because you're going to get your ass kicked. And so it was ugly. It's a very funny moment from the Eagles documentary, but man, can you imagine that? It's harrowing. Harrowing.
Yeah, I mean, and very talented guys in that band.
Yes. Oh, fantastic, right? Like
Um,
even the minor players, like even Randy Meisner, the bass player,
yep,
right?
yep,
He's in Poco. He does high harmony, sings great
yeah.
harmony singer. And then he writes a song called Take It to the Limit. And you can talk about the greatest Eagles
Oh
songs of all
shit,
time.
that's
Man, I would
right.
put that right up there. And his
Yeah,
live version of that from the Eagles live album is one of the greatest goosebumping inducing performances I've ever heard in my life.
and you got guys like Joe Walsh who were like great solo artists on their own, but also added a really great flavor to the band as well,
Sure,
right?
sure.
Yeah.
All right, buddy.
Well,
Jesus,
what's
I don't know.
next? What do we
I
got?
don't know. Okay, I want to tell you one that's really kind of sorted. Okay,
All
so
right.
it's the Fugees who had a bunch of hits, late '90s, early 2000s, late '90s.
The
Anyway,
Who?
one of the biggest bands in the world in the 1990s, right at the height of their success, lead singer Lauryn Hill and Wyclef Jean, who's possibly what you would consider one of the masterminds behind the band, they have an affair. Okay. Wyclef is married. I think that Lauren is in a relationship. She reveals that she's pregnant and says, Wyclef, this is yours. It turns out it's not his. It's one of Bob Marley's sons, not Ziggy. Anyway, it's one of the Marley boys is the father. Okay, so it is a mess, a total dramatic soap opera, worse, so much worse than Fleetwood Mac because Fleetwood Mac survived it.
Right.
These guys, it got bad, and Lauren establishes her own solo career and wins a bunch of Grammys for the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, and it's a great album, like a classic, one of the first hip hop albums to ever win kind of the top line Grammy awards. But the band has not reunited since, and it's been pretty ugly. And she has suffered from some stuff that I don't quite understand, but there could be some mental health issues in there. But anyway, I hope her the best because she's a phenomenal singer. And but can you imagine the drama that would have caused? Oh my God, Kenny.
Brent says I never knew about a lot of this stuff.
Yes, yeah, yeah. You
Some
know,
great stuff, great stories.
with someone who has a little bit of an inside scoop on some of these stories, I do remember it was probably about 2015 or 2016. Fleetwood Mac had just come off the road, and a friend of mine who knew Stevie quite well said uh, that Stevie told her, "I am never touring with that man again. I cannot stand touring with Lindsay. Like Lindsay's, he's you know, he's unacceptable." And I think some of the times that he would do things like, while Stevie is dancing around twirling in her kind of gauzy outfit that she wears,
Right,
sometimes like Lindsay would make fun of her from the side of the stage.
right.
And it's Stevie Nicks. Like whatever your background drama is, don't be disrespectful on stage, right?
Did you actually watch Daisy Jones and the Six?
Yeah, I loved it.
Wasn't that great?
Oh, it was great. Yes, yeah.
That was a great. That's Elvis Presley's granddaughter.
It sure is, and she's
Yeah,
great. And she was going through a lot around the time of the creation of that show, and she was dealing with I think her mother was in a really bad way. This is just before her mother's passing, Lisa Marie,
yeah, yeah,
and seeing her on stage and doing what she did. She's an actor. She's not a singer. Riley Keough is not a singer, and she does this thing with Sam Claflin, as I think is the guy who plays kind of the Lindsay character.
yep,
Even though
yep.
it's not about
No, it's loosely based. It's loosely
very
based.
loosely, and it is
Yep.
so good. I would highly recommend Daisy Jones and the Six for
Yeah,
sure.
great show. There's talk about whether there's going to be a sequel to that.
Yeah, I mean, there could be, and a lot of people would watch it. I think they should leave it as is. I think it is a perfect one season
It,
story.
it was definitely a great limited series. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was like, man, this is great. We're going to follow this career of this band. Then you find out, whoa, this
Yeah.
happens. This happens. Although it's interesting because she does say to them both, you should get back together and write again
Hmm.
before she dies, right?
Right. Right.
So there might be I think there'd be enough fans out there to go, you know what, we'd like to see where they could take
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
next chapter of his and her lives because maybe they do get together and they do write another album. Who
Yeah.
knows,
For
right?
sure. Let's
Anyway,
quickly, because we're running out of time here. You don't mind if I go a few extra minutes, do
you
you?
you know what, you can go over because this is your last show, man.
You know what? And because we're breaking up, Ken, we're never speaking to each other again,
Oh
except
God,
until the next time.
not even
Anyway,
at the family picnic.
yeah, I look forward to that, buddy. I look forward to that. So in 1969, I think it's 69, John Lennon is basically saying he's had enough and he wants to leave the group. But the other Beatles say, "Like, don't make a public announcement. We've got a new album coming out. Just kind of keep it under wraps." And meanwhile, they're having this internal squabble. And Lennon says that the Beatles really came to an end when their manager Brian Epstein died in 1967, because all of a sudden the management of the band was up to the band as opposed to the managers, and so John Lennon agrees, don't say anything, and then he's really surprised and really pissed off when Paul McCartney announces that he's leaving the Beatles. When everyone told John, don't announce it. And then Paul, a few months later, leaves the Beatles. And one of the reasons why he leaves the Beatles was because of the production of Let It Be. They release an album
Yep,
that of many of McCartney's best songs,
yep.
And arguably, no one else really contributed great stuff to that album other than
Yep.
McCartney. Arguably,
Yep.
you could say, "I Me Mine" is a good song by George, and Lennon did I Got a Feeling, great song. But McCartney did, Long and Winding Road and Let It Be and Get Back, right? Like
And,
amazing.
and the cool thing was, to me, that led to his next journey into Wings.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's really pissed off because they leave the production of that album to Phil Spector because they can't even
Yeah.
agree
And
to
Phil messed it
meet.
up bad
And
in some
and
ways.
Phil adds this syrup. He pours syrup all over the Long and Winding Road, which is actually a really beautiful song done by the four members of the Beatles. And Phil Spector gussies it up or glosses it up with this overproduction and all that, and a choir, and he hated it, and he demanded that he heard a copy before it was released, and then it comes out with none of the changes that he wanted. He goes, "I am out of here." And so
Yeah,
that's
and I think part of the thing was, talk about stepping up. So when Epstein passed away, right?
yeah,
Um, Paul was the guy that stepped up
yes,
to lead the band.
right. And he
And
was the adult in the room, like you've said before, right? He was doing a lot of the heavy lifting because John Lennon was in such a bad way with his
yep,
heroin addiction
yep.
and his all the other things that were distracting him.
And John didn't want to listen to Paul. I mean, he saw Paul as his writing partner, and couldn't let Paul lead. If Paul had led that band, they would have wrote more great music.
Right.
Because
Yes.
Paul would have said to John, "Get your shit together, get your addiction under control, and let's write some great music again."
Absolutely. Now, can you imagine? Okay, I've done this on Famous Last Words, the podcast that I do with Christopher. I said, Christopher, can you imagine what Band on the Run would have sounded like by the Beatles? It would have been great. It would have been great. And can you imagine what Imagine would have sounded like? Imagine would have been a great song. It would have been very much like John wrote it, but just imagine. Sorry, pun intended, but
Yeah.
think of Ringo adding his drum fills to Imagine, and imagine what sorry, can't help myself, what George Harrison would be doing to that song. And think of what My Sweet Lord would have sounded like, or What Is Life by George, and all those great songs that George wrote for Ringo, including Photograph. Every time I see your face, it
Yeah.
reminds me of a place we used to go,
E
like
e
all
e
that stuff.
and
Oh,
if they had listened to McCartney around all that stuff and let him manage the band, he would have brought very tasteful amounts of orchestration to the band,
yeah.
on some of their productions, because McCartney really understood that whole composition piece very, very well.
Sure. I don't think that Paul should have managed the band, but I don't think they should have gotten Alan Klein to manage the band.
Well,
The problem is that Paul wanted to get his father-in-law, and there we've talked about that
there you
before.
go, that
That might not have
nepotism
been
thing,
good
yeah.
too. Yeah, that might not
Yeah.
have been good. So anyway, buddy, we could talk for hours. We could spend another hour just talking about Kiss and their breakup.
Yeah,
And
Brent says he's gonna miss you. I
oh,
wanna put
buddy.
that out there.
Thanks, Brent. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Kiss breakup thing, I mean, geez, there's been so much, there's been Kiss and makeup as well.
Yep. Yeah.
And now they're on their is this gonna be the final tour? Do you really
I
think it's
think
gonna
it
be
will be. I honestly do. I think this is it. I think that I don't think Paul Stanley wants to do it anymore. I kind of don't think that Gene Simmons wants to do it anymore. I think that I think they've had enough. The four guys that are in the band are, obviously I would love to see Ace and Peter, but like Paul Stanley said to Howard Stern, like, you can't see those guys up on stage with us because if Ace and Peter join us at this point where they are in their abilities now, they wouldn't be called Kiss, they'd be called Piss.
I remember
Imagine
him saying
hearing
that.
that.
I remember him saying that in interviews, like,
Jeez,
really?
dude.
That's a you don't say stuff like that
No.
publicly.
I think what happens is when you're in a conversation, I think it was with Howard Stern, you just kind of get carried away with it and
Yeah.
you forget, dude, your mic is on. Like
Yeah,
just
that can bring the
yeah,
worst out in people,
yeah.
I'm sure.
And then
Hey,
a
listen,
bass
there's not
cover it.
I got
Yeah.
somebody else here who's sad you're leaving. He's crying. Charlie's gonna miss you, man.
Okay. Thanks, Charlie. I am going to not miss you, Charlie.
That annoying chicken.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Anyway,
man.
before we go, Ken, I just want
Yeah.
to first of all, I want to thank you once again. Sorry, did you have any more that you wanted to do with the thing?
Well, no, I think you covered a great bunch of it. I mean, we did we talk about the Everly Brothers at all during the whole course of the evening?
Yeah.
Because I think that the Gallagher brothers learned from them.
And the Davies brothers, right? The Kinks, guys in the Kinks. Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just a whole bunch of them, and like I said, you get that much testosterone in the room. I mean, I don't know. It's like wasn't Bono that said um, you get that many guys in the room, somebody wants to be king.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And then sometimes you need a leader, right? Is like, not every when you get four guys or a combination of men and women in a group, there's somebody's going to want to lead, somebody's going to want to follow, and then it's not always going to be the same people who are doing
and,
that.
and there's a difference between leading, and I want to leave this. I think it's a great discussion to have about this stuff. There's a difference between leading and coordinating.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
some people see it as leading when the other person is really just coordinating. They're trying to bring out the best that everybody has. They're standing outside the band looking at the other members going, I want you to contribute. I want you to do this. I want you to do this. So I'm constantly doing things. Maybe I'm arranging the song, but I'm arranging the song so you can contribute more to it.
sure. Well, yeah, the
Right.
best example of that in recent memory is the Get Back movie about the Beatles creating the Let It Be album and prepping for that on the roof that rooftop concert, right? And Paul just trying to keep everybody on the same page and being a diplomat, being a bit of a taskmaster, being a bit of a manager, but also creating some of the most brilliant songs ever. Like
Yeah.
there you go.
Ne-
As you can see, we're
Definitely.
both Paul guys.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, it has been a pleasure having you on the show. As I said
Thank you.
before, you bring such a wealth of knowledge of the music industry, and you have great stories that I think strike home with a lot of people that watch the show. And you always do your homework. I mean, you do a shitload of research for these shows, and it shows. It really does.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Sometimes I'm I benefit from all the experiences that I've had with some of these artists. So all you need to do, you Kenny, is flick the switch in my brain with a story, and then I go, oh yeah, we talked to that person, and then I can relay the story. But one of the things I want to say is to anybody watching this or listening to this or however you're consuming this particular show, and that is that when people like Ken um, put their work on the line, and when they support music and when they put out a show like this, the best thing you can do is to support the show. There's so many things you can do to support his work or perhaps my work, and that is by sharing it with other people. And yes, Ken.
There's a tip jar
Oh,
right
there's a
there.
tip jar right there. Yes. So go to the tip jar or help in any way you can. Like go
Share the
on.
video.
Right, go
Yeah.
share the video, but go on the Indie Tunes website and pay $10 for one of the albums, right? Like that stuff is great, and it makes us believe that we're doing this, because for the most part we do this sometimes for no money or sometimes for a very very small amount of money. Like for our Famous Last Words podcast, it is one of the best music based podcasts. We're in the top 20% of listeners
Excellent.
for all podcasts, right? No, we're not in the top 20 for podcasts because there's over a million, but only certain podcasts, have more than like 100 or 150 or 200 listeners. And so we're in the upper echelon there. But what we need to promote the show is sponsorship, and the way we do that is by getting more support from people. So
Yeah.
support the content creators like myself, like Kenny, and like the artists that Kenny promotes, and it goes a long way. Sometimes it's only a few bucks, or sometimes it's only a thumbs up or a 5-star rating or a follow or a subscribe on a podcast such as ours, or a show like Kenny's sharing the video. It's really great because it makes us feel that what we're doing is communicating with people. And if you like it, please tell someone about it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great music that we're going to be putting out from the record label as well. So go to indietunes.com, check us out there, or at indietunesrecords.com. We've got both of those domains now, and so check us out. Check out our artist music, and yeah, as Tom said, download an album. It's cheap. It's it's cheaper than a cup of coffee per track, and it's a great thing about music. It'll last you a lifetime.
Absolutely.
It's an easy process to do, and it supports independent artists. And I always feel like the manager from Jerry Maguire, help me, help you.
That's great, Ken. Thanks
Well,
so much.
I'm Kenny, and
I'm Tom.
that is Tom, and you are not him, and you are not me.
Wow.
So thank you for joining us on the Indie Show, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
Take care, everyone.
All right, happy smile.